Welcome to Making Learning Matter to Your Students, addressing how educators grow the self-reflection of learners for deep engagement in complex and impactful challenges, whether in face-to-face, blended, or virtual learning formats. It is my pleasure to introduce you to Diane Ullman, an international educational leader and accreditation leader for NEASC. Diane will continue to facilitate the introduction of this session's presenters. Diane, the stage is yours.
Thank you so much, Fran, and welcome to everybody in our audience this morning. We're delighted to have you with us and very eager to share with you the stories that we have about learning from around the world. This morning, we're going to share 3 stories as well as create for you a picture of a framework that can be used to think about how to make learning matter to your students. I'm accompanied this morning by my colleagues Allison Zmuda and Kathleen Nagli, who will introduce themselves when they come on to do their part. But for now, I want to just give you the sense of what our presentation is going to be about. So we really hope that our stories and the framework that we share will make learning come alive for you and give you inspiration about how you can make learning come alive for your students. We are choosing to use stories to present our message and our meaning this morning because we believe that stories unite us through a shared culture and values, and we hope that it will help you connect to the kind of concepts that we're presenting this morning. So with that, let's jump into our session. Next slide, please.
So, oh, good.
Okay, so VUCA. This is a concept that I became familiar with several years ago, but my goodness, 9 months ago, VUCA was an abstract concept. Now it's the world that we're living in. Volatility, uncertainty, complexity, ambiguity. We are living in this world and it has meaning for all of us, whether we are a parent, a student, or a teacher. It is what our environment has brought to us, and we have no choice but to really engage ourselves with what this means and how it changes our world. Next slide, please. So this is our world today, and in fact, it's the world that our students live in and the world that they're having to negotiate. So issues like climate change, like immigration, like social injustice, other ways of thinking about the world in terms of global pandemics and economic instability. These are things that are ever present in our lives. COVID has brought this to us in a way that has made it vivid and made it just impossible to not face. Families are living through these conflicts. When I say families, I mean the adults in the family as well as the students.
Hi, everyone. I'm Kathleen Nagli, and I'm the head of School of International School of Helsinki, and joining with some of the stories we're telling today. Looking at this slide, you can see that the current context at the moment is what we're in. We're in this moment of volatility, as Diane indicated, and we see in the picture, students socially distanced on the left, and trying to understand how we approach new types of teaching and learning. At the same time, we have to keep our students engaged and motivated to understand that they can have a part in some of the solutions of the future. So how we take the current crisis and re-engage our students in that content, really, of what's happening around the world is incredibly important, because that's going to create meaningful dialogue between students to students and students to teachers and students to others in the world. So this is an important piece that we're not going to lose hope with our students in this current stage. Sorry. What's more important at the moment, what we're seeing, maybe more important than anything in our staff and our students, is health and well-being. And this is beyond having yoga classes for others. This is about really understanding what it takes for a child to feel good about themselves, and the attention we need to bring at the moment for those, especially that are in distance learning, that we could be losing touch with them at the moment. They're turning their cameras off. And how do we reconnect with them and make sure that we bring this foundation of well-being, because nothing else is going to happen. No great learning is not going to happen for these students unless we move forward. I'm going to turn it over now to Allison.
Thank you so much, Kathleen. And I am Allison one more time, and Diane, Kathleen, and I are connected in our commitment to growing learning to be meaningful and actionable, something that's worthy of spending time persevering on. And the intention of this work is really very much grounded in the human being, the notion of thinking about what the individual learner wants, their hopes, their dreams, their needs, their aspirations, and doing this in consultation with the individual child, as opposed to doing things on their behalf. So we're going to introduce you in a moment to the 4 attributes to continue to enrich the learning experience. And when we show this to you in a minute, this is something that we are going to use as an anchor to begin to better understand the stories that we're going to be sharing with you later on in our session together. The intention as well is, if you can move to the next slide, Kathleen. The intention as well of starting to think about, in what ways are we growing the capacity of our learners? So if you can study the screen for a moment, I'll give you a moment to read. And I want to talk through each of these 4 attributes. These 4 attributes are very much interdependent with one another. The origin of these 4 attributes was work that Benna Kallick, who was one of the co-authors of Habits of Mind with Art Costa many years ago. Benna and I began to start thinking about the connection between the territory of personalizing learning and habits of mind. And we started to anchor them in these 4 potential attributes that can be used to sort and sift through a set of learning experiences, to amplify, to create more meaningful and enriching connections, but also to begin to invite students not just to the design table, but also to the evaluation table, the reflection table, so that they are very much part of the learning process, as opposed to learning that is done to them. So the first attribute is voice. And again, you can see that on the left side of the screen. But the notion is that these 4 terms hopefully are not jargon. So I'll talk them through with you. Voice is really about the opportunity for students to believe that what they say matters. So from a learner's point of view, it's the opportunity to share my thinking, share my perspective. But I also have an opportunity to describe why I'm feeling that way. The set of data, evidence, feeling statements. They can actually clarify their voice, not just through verbal articulation, but also through images, through diagrams. The intention here is that we want to make sure that their voice has a meaningful impact on not just what they're doing and how they're doing it, but how they're processing it. The second piece is co-creation. And co-creation is very much grounded in the fact that students really need to start thinking about their role as investigators, as creators. So oftentimes when I run workshops on this, is the opportunity to start thinking about the teachers creating parameters, constraints. And then within that space, students are very much empowered to engage in creative problem solving, in shaping territory that is worthy and tapping into what it is that they're fascinated by, but is still in service to that broader topic, unit, or course that the teacher is designing. Social construction is the opportunity to think about how we learn from one another. So social construction from a student point of view is seeking out ideas, information from experts. But also another aspect of social construction is sharing your expertise. So the notion of it being something that you're curating, but also contributing to the outside world continues to enliven not only the discourse that happens in social construction, but also feeling ownership that you've had an impact on the continuing or evolving body of knowledge, or the kinds of services and actions that you're contributing, or the creations that you're sharing, the discoveries that you've made. And finally, self-discovery. Self-discovery is grounded in the fact that the heartbeat of what learning is all about is better understanding who I am, how I see the world, what I'm seeing as I continue to examine my work over the past couple weeks or couple months. The impact of self-discovery is truly transformative. It actually does create a need or an idea for next steps or future goals. And when students are engaged in these kinds of conversations, when they actually are behaving and acting in this way, it creates a space for them to be partners in the learning process, as opposed to folks that are in the passenger seat. Next slide. So we just want to review a couple of concrete examples on this slide before we start to take a look at the 3 stories. So when you're starting to think about how this plays out, how the 4 attributes play out, let's pay attention, for example, to the idea of voice and social construction. Now, again, please note that you do not need to go after one at a time. So you can think about all 4 all at once. But at the same time, really identifying or highlighting a couple of examples really clarifies the intent of that instructional move. So the idea of probing questions, these are questions that teachers are continually asking the students. And you use probing questions to be able to have students describe their thinking at a deeper level. It does require students to pause, to perseverate, to think through, or to think through things anew. So a probing question could be something like, tell me why you think that, or how is this related to that? The intention of probing questions is really, again, designed to push the thinking of the student, or to push the thinking of the group or of the class. And the other interesting aspect of this is that it becomes social construction, not because it's the property of the teacher doing something to the student, but in fact, the most powerful dialogues are having students use probing questions with one another to continue to demonstrate that they very much care about listening with understanding and empathy, the opportunity to better understand what somebody is saying so that they can actually build upon it, extend it, actually create another perspective or point of view. The second example is protocols, and the power of using protocols like See, Think, Wonder, which is a very common thinking routine that from the Harvard Institute. The interesting piece of this is that it creates a structure or a frame so that students actually can engage in this protocol without taking things way too personally. I've actually found that protocols not only help sort of create guardrails on conversations with 8-year-olds and 11-year-olds, but I also find them to be quite powerful and helpful when working with professional colleagues. The idea of a protocol is really starting to think about how do we give space for each individual voice to be heard. And oftentimes in a group of people, whether you're thinking about a group of 13-year-olds or a group of 8 or 9 colleagues, sometimes people don't necessarily speak their mind. Sometimes they process a little bit more. So protocols and visible thinking routines create that kind of structure or space so everybody has an opportunity to share what's on their mind. But because they're sharing what's on their mind, protocols, visible thinking routines also help continue to insist on social construction because we extend, we contradict, we compare, we synthesize. Those are the features of what many protocols and visible thinking routines do to continue to elevate the culture of thinking in a classroom or in a faculty meeting, but also to inspire fresh ideas and new approaches and new ways. So I'm going to turn it over to Diane to lead into the examples from around the globe. Diane, we can't hear you. There we go.
Thank you. Allison, great introduction to the framework, which is an important part of our presentation. As I mentioned earlier, we're going to share 3 stories. One is from the American Institute of Monterey in Mexico. Another is the International School of Helsinki in Finland. Thank you, Kathleen. And finally, the International School of Curitiba in Brazil. By the way, all 3 are NEASC accredited schools, and that's how we found our examples and are able to bring them back to you today by visiting those schools. So we're going to take you through these 3 examples, but ask you to think through the framework, the attributes, as you listen to the examples, and use that framework to really ground yourselves in what you see in the videos that represents each of those 4 quadrants. So now you may see all 4, you may only see 1 or 2, but begin thinking about, as you listen to to Kathleen present, or listen to the 2 videos for the American Institute of Monterey and the International School of Curitiba, as you listen to them, think about which aspects of the framework you're able to hear. So we hope that these examples will resonate with you personally, that they will inspire you, they will really get you to ask questions about your own practice and begin thinking about how you can use this framework to begin to reimagine your own work. Next slide, please. So, as I begin and about to share an example from the from the American Institute of Monterey, which of the attributes do you see based on this example, and how might that inspire your thinking about what can be imagined in your school? And again, hopefully taking away from this the sense that this is hopefully going to inspire you to rethink some of your own practices. So the video that we're going to watch is about authentic applications at the American Institute of Monterey, where students are increasingly engaged in project-based learning. So it starts with the elementary school and continues all the way up through the 12th grade. Students adapt their strategies based on experience and feedback, which is a theme that runs through all 12 years of schooling at AIM. And they use adults as coaches and mentors, and it gets progressively more student-centered as they move up through the grades. They begin in the early grades by doing interdisciplinary units, and then they move on into the middle school as they begin to explore interdisciplinary projects in a deeper way. This project that you're going to see is a part of the core curriculum. It's not an extra experience that students have, but it is a way of applying their knowledge and skills that they've learned throughout their grade level and their schooling to real life problems. Next slide, please. The project that you're going to see is called Paso a Paso, and it's students from 4 academies. So the American Institute of Monterey at the high school level is organized into 4 academies. Students in the 9th and 10th grade explore each of the academies, and then by the 11th grade, they spend more intensive time in 2 of the academies, and in the 12th grade, they pick 1 to specialize in. And so what you're going to see is 4 students, 1 from each of the 4 academies, who are working on this problem, Paso a Paso, which is aimed at addressing some of the issues with immigrants that they see. Monterey, Mexico is positioned geographically so that continuously immigrants from Central and South America are coming through Monterey as they head north. And so one thing to know about the school is that one of their larger aims, whether it be at the elementary, middle, or high school level, is to have social impact. And you will see that for sure here. Entrepreneurship is another really big feature of AIM. So this example, think of it through the 4 attributes. And if you wouldn't mind putting your comments in the chat as you watch the video. Next slide, please. And here we go. Oh, we need audio. If you just hold on a second, we'll make sure that we get some audio here. So we're going to have to stop and reshare. Apologize for the delay here. It'll just take a moment.
Hi, Diane. It's playing on my screen, but not on yours, apparently. It's for sound. Let me.
So if the audience can hear sound, that's great. It's fine if I don't.
Does the audience hear it? Were they hearing it? In the chat, do we know? Try again.
It's time to change for the better.
Oh, okay, there we go. How about back to the beginning?
Their situation.
And we're from Monterey, Mexico.
We are Paso a Paso.
Yeah.
As a team, we identified the extreme need that immigrants from Central and South America are in. We created Paso a Paso to aid them with first aid kits, clothes, food, and toiletry items in a backpack.
Hundreds of migrants pass through our city to get to the United States with the hope of finding a better life. Nonetheless, these people are considered unwelcome and therefore treated horribly. It's time to change for the better. We know that as high school students, there's not much we can do to change their situation. Nevertheless, we think that giving them backpacks is the best and most accessible way for us to help them. We want to prove that they are not alone and that there's people who actually care. The first step into doing our project was to choose one of the UN Sustainable Development Goals, and we decided to choose number 16, which is peace, justice, and strong institutions.
We visited Casa Monarca, which is a refugee center. In there, we learned more about their living situations by interviewing them. In our backpacks, we wanted to include food since it's what they desperately need the most. We wanted to include protein bars since it's the best way to provide the most nutrients. Nevertheless, after doing some research, we found out that commercial protein bars aren't the best opinion. Brands often lie about their sugar numbers to sell better. Can you believe that there exist protein bars that have higher level of sugar than cake? We decided that making our own protein bars would be the healthier option. In addition, we thought that giving them a homemade flavor will make them feel more welcome.
We made 60 backpacks with all of these things, and then we gave them to people in Casa Monarca and around Monterey. We presented our project for the first time, and it was okay, but we realized that we needed to transcend it. So we created 3 more aspects to the project. Number 1 was to receive donated items from HEB to make our granola bars, because that was the part of the project that we spent most money on. Second is to talk to schools for them to help us. We will give presentations at schools and they will help us with money so we can keep making these backpacks. And the third one was we received mentorship from the founder of Casa Monarca and his helpers in order to create a job connection between immigrants who have certain skills to companies in Monterrey that need more employees.
Currently, we are still working to improve our project.
We have a long way to go, but we're really happy about having a time and a space to create our own ideas and develop them here at school. Thank you.
All right. Oh, Allison?
So I love that some folks have started to identify a couple of different attributes. So again, I'll give you a moment to sort of sift through not only the identification, but also the rationale, the reason why. Take a moment, whether you're scrolling through the chat and seeing what other people are saying, or you're coming up with your own idea. So this powerful example really is one of the highlights of what voice co-creation, social construction, and self-discovery are. One of the areas that I really paid attention to right away was the fact that they identified one of the United Nations Sustainable Goals. That's an example of providing a parameter or a structure for students to begin to identify and choose, but also use that as a baseline to explore, to investigate, to better understand the problem. So co-creation immediately stood out to me. And again, this is an important difference, that co-creation is very different from differentiation. Differentiation is, here are 2 or 3 choices that I've approved as a classroom teacher. You pick one. Co-creation is starting to move into a space of, here are some meaningful constraints. Here are some problems. Here's a territory. The UN Sustainable Goals are a territory. And in that fact, they then had an opportunity to use that as a launch to start investigating. The co-creation not only was very much grounded in better understanding the problem, but it took some twists and turns. So social construction was another significant part of the project as I started to really pay attention to what the students were saying. They interviewed, for example, at a refugee center. So start to figure out and think through, what are the concerns? What do these people really genuinely need? But the other part of social construction goes through the idea of research. And sometimes social construction doesn't lead to a desirable result, which means they go back into co-creation when they started to figure out, because they were dissatisfied with purchasing protein bars, they wanted to make their own protein bars to create a level of hominess and comfort, but also to continue to make sure that it actually had much more nutritional value as opposed to being loaded with sugar. The final piece from a self-discovery point of view is what they've learned about themselves along the way. There is a level of just connection to the work. Hopefully you saw that. But there's also sort of this dimension of not being satisfied enough. When I heard the students say at the very end that when we first presented our project, it wasn't quite good enough yet. That is another example of continuing to be motivated, not because of a mark or a score or completion, but because they believe that they are moving into a direction that has promise, that they are finding value and benefit from the action in and of itself. So this goes well beyond completing the project for a particular mark. The other part of self-discovery is what they are seeing in terms of themselves through the lens of social impact and entrepreneurship. There's so much power and magic in this example. So thank you so much, Diane, for sharing.
Hi, everyone. So I'm going to talk through some examples that we had at our school in the past few years that we felt became powerful ways of thinking about how we move forward with our curriculum and activities at the school. And the first thing, the first story I want to tell you about is our what became our Social Justice Day, and then I'll talk through a reimagined PYP unit. So when I first came to the school, I saw on the school calendar a couple of years ago that there was going to be we had a Saturday work day where the students had to come to school, and something happened. And as I asked, what happened last year, and they told me, well, we had a fun run. And I said, okay, well, what was the fun run about? And no one really remembered what the fun run was about, or what charity, or what they were even doing during that event. So in the first round of thinking of that, we thought, well, this is not meaningful. Why are we doing something? Why are we gathering and not having a purpose or a meaning to it? So the first year we did end up doing things around climate. I had a teacher who had organized some work around a climate day. We had a little protest around the city, and it was very teacher driven. Later that year, I had two of my highly engaged high school girls come to me and say, hey, the climate change day was interesting, but we were wondering if we could create a social justice day, and we'll do the work around it. And I said, okay, well, prepare a pitch for me and tell me what you're going to do, and imagine what that would look like for the school. So the students went back and conceived of activities and processes to create first this Youth for Change Day, which came that following August or September for our school. And the students did all of the work that normally would happen in event planning that teachers or the PTO would have been involved in. So we let them go through the process, and we didn't want them to be controlled or to feel that we were somehow handling this for them. I wanted them to go through the process authentically. And so they spoke to the PTO about it first, what kind of help they might need from the PTO. They made their own parameters as what this day would be. One was that they were very committed to sustainability. So they said, let's make it a zero waste day. Whereas in the previous years, we had people selling things and lots of food. And we said, okay, we can have a picnic lunch, but people bring their lunch from home, and then they take their trash with them that day. So we're not going to create a mess during a Youth for Change Day kind of feeling. And they had very special things they wanted to showcase. And one was, for example, they wanted to celebrate the LGBT youth of our school. And they made a rainbow garden, where students were painting pots that they would plant flowers in, and then would be this display of rainbow colors. So there was lots of passion from the students. They created the pitch, they created the poster, they organized workers, they organized staff, they organized parents. Was it as big as an event as maybe that fun run had been years before? Probably not. Was it authentic to students? Absolutely. So that was my experience with the Youth for Change Day. The other example I wanted to talk about was a PYP unit we did with parents. So I had an amazing PYP coordinator, Sharon Skirdick, who does the PYP chat if you're a PYP fan. And what she decided to do was to have parents take a look at the unit that we were working on in the early years, and that they would come and help create this unit on homes and families. So from the very start, we had parents join us in the creation, in the collaboration meetings with teachers building that unit. And we saw this as a chance for them to engage with the curriculum, understand how the PYP works, and that they felt embedded and a part of the curriculum. So I'm going to have you now take a look as well. Looking at these two examples, take a few minutes in the chat room and think through again, which of these attributes were evident in these examples, and what might inspire your thinking, what could be imagined in your school?
And thank you so much, Kathleen. I would love for you to go back one slide so that people can continue to have that visual prompt.
Sure.
And in the chat one more time, you see the 4 attributes.
Great.
So take a moment, think through one or both examples, and what do you see? So Dominique right out of the gate said voice. And so when you're starting to think about voice and the power of the 4 attributes, is they can be used in the first example, and the first story was really about what students were doing. This second story really was about parent voice and the opportunity for parents to begin to see what their role and impact in shaping a learning experience with their students at a school. So the interesting dynamic is that when parents begin to sort of think through not only the voice I have in my own child's learning, not just in a home setting, but also in a school setting. So when a handful of parents had an opportunity to really begin to understand, what does it take to design a PYP unit? And how does that actually, not only are we co-creating that, but what are we designing it around? So the notion of thinking about the thematic approach, the inquiry approach, that very heartbeat of what powerful PYP is all about. Also the idea from a parent's point of view, they started to understand not only what PYP was after in the first place, but at the same time could better understand what students were saying to them at home, as well as starting to understand and reflect upon the kinds of experiences they were designing as part of their own family unit. So the co-creation piece is significant, as well as self-discovery. I'm seeing a lot of ideas around social construction. Social construction is very much part of the co-creation, not just in the development of the PYP unit, but also in thinking about the transformation of fun day to social justice. And the interesting dynamic is that the social construction part actually had a grieving aspect associated with it. There are a lot of parents that were not necessarily reluctant, but it had a level of fun. So, and you know, it's something that people looked forward to. So the interesting aspect when you're moving it from fun day to a social justice event, it does really start to step back and rethink and reimagine what is the heart of what this day is all about. So I was also interested in what Kathleen was sharing, that it was something that they want to make sure that it was not designed to be wasteful. They also wanted to make sure that it was designed to be impactful. So I love the conversations that are happening in the chat right now. I'm noticing what Patricia is saying, that learners are independent and they're starting to know what they want. They've discovered themselves through the journey. And that ultimately is the heart of what schools are doing, not just with our students, but also with our staff and our families and our communities. That's the spirit of how we can continue to sort of sit with more complex, more uncertain and unpredictable problems and challenges, just like VUCA, as we started the presentation out, and at the same time feel they are more competent and capable, that they can actually begin to think through problems and challenges that don't have a right answer, that don't have a predictable solution path, and feel that they are the stewards of their own learning. Certainly not independent from the classroom teacher, but at the same time, the interaction with the classroom teacher starts to shift to more of a partnership role than a sage on the stage role. So with that, I'm going to return it back over to Diane for this third example.
Thanks, Allison. I really feel like I need to comment on Kathleen's example before I move into the last one here. in that one of the benefits of the work that she described, particularly the one where parents were involved, so many schools, as they're trying to shift the way that school works and the way school happens, it can be very difficult for parents to understand why those shifts are happening and what the effect would be on their students. And by involving parents early on in this process, you can actually give them the experience of what their own children will have when they engage in more authentic learning challenges. So here we are again, back at the 4 attributes, and voice, co-creation, social construction, and self-discovery. And we're going to think about it through one more example, which is an example of teacher learning. So we've done student learning, parent learning, and now our third example is focused on the learning of teachers. Just as I said with Kathleen's example and the impact that involving them can have on their understanding, their own understanding, but also the experience, understanding the experience of their students. When teachers are able to engage in learning that represents these 4 quadrants, that they have voice, that they have the opportunity to create their own learning experiences and influence their own work, and when they can work with others to create learning experiences for students that are truly meaningful, they learn so much about who they are, and it makes them better at their jobs. So we could advance a slide here. So International School of Curitiba has, as one of its core goals, impacts, is that it wants to engage as a school community in research and reflection. Research and reflection is a core part of what students experience, and the school decided that this was something that was very important for the adults in the environment to experience as well. So as a whole school, they accessed a body of research on motivation, and you'll hear from David Manel, who is the director of this program. You'll hear from him in a moment, that they accessed that body of research on motivation because motivation was something that the whole school was interested in exploring. And through this, teachers develop new practices through action research. The point being that they actually learned something that they brought into their teaching after testing it out and learning what worked and what didn't work. And so students are also independently applying research on motivation to their own learning. So this is a thread that runs through the International School of Curitiba, not only for the adults in the learning environment, but it then flows down into the work of students. And so the whole school becomes an environment where action research, the action part being important, research to influence learning of both adults and students. Right now, we're going to see a video clip about teachers engaging in action research. It's about a 4-minute clip, and it will be our last one of the morning. So can we move to the next slide? Okay. Uh-oh, we don't have audio again. Whatever we did last time should work again.
I've had that
No sound again?
over the last couple of years.
There we go. Can you just start it from the beginning?
Yep.
Of our school. I'm the research coordinator here at the International School of Curitiba in Brazil. I'm also a high school teacher, and I've had that pretty awesome opportunity over the last couple of years to help lead a group of educators at our school in the area of action research.
There's no audio.
They might be.
Do you have audio
Since
now?
we're a school that operates from early childhood all the way up through high school graduates, we really wanted to start with a focus on something that all people at our school could have the opportunity to research, which is why we settled on this idea of character. all students can learn character, all teachers can teach character. And so it was a nice starting point for us to start to think about what we're doing in our classrooms that promote or don't promote good character. Motivation is an area of research from a major partner of ours, Research Schools International. This was a group founded by Dr. Christina Hinton out of Harvard to connect schools across the globe who have common interests in action research and this approach that I've mentioned in trying to understand how research can apply to schools' local contexts. So by working with Research Schools International,
We lost audio.
I think Kathleen dropped out.
Oh, okay. Sorry, folks.
Brian's actually right. So Kathleen, if you can keep your video on so that we can hear the audio. I don't know if you're still there.
Is that now?
Yes, perfect.
All students can learn character, all teachers can teach character. And so it was a nice starting point for us to start to think about what we're doing in our classrooms that promote or don't promote good character. Motivation is an area of research from a major partner of ours, Research Schools International. This was a group founded by Dr. Christina Hinton out of Harvard to connect schools across the globe who have common interests in action research and this approach that I've mentioned in trying to understand how research can apply to schools' local contexts. So by working with Research Schools International, or RSI, we had the opportunity to learn from schools around the world and how they've approached this challenge of motivation and character. But we got to look at this in our own context. One of the first steps that we undertook in this relationship was trying to get to know the research around character and motivation. It was a great opportunity for us as teachers. Many of the people in the group have mentioned they wanted to improve their own practice as their motivation for joining the group. And so the way that we started was getting together and having conversations about this research. So looking at what academics are saying about motivation and character, looking at what other schools in this RSI partnership have found in their own motivation and character studies was a really valuable starting point for us. It got us on the same page, talking about some of the same things, and that set us up really well for RSI's first visit to our campus.
Hi, my name is Kathy, and I teach 6th and 7th graders in middle school here at ISC. We started a project about motivating kids and specifically with challenges in middle school because RSI came and we did a survey with elementary, middle school, and high school students. And middle school students in particular had a big lull in how they approached challenges according to the survey. So we decided to figure out the answer to the question, does an advisory course specifically geared towards growth mindset affect or influence the students' attitudes toward challenges? We decided to focus on grade 6. We split the whole grade level into 2 different groups randomly, and we developed an 8-lesson course for a growth mindset, and then the control group, did a different set of lessons. We did a pre and post survey to see if indeed their attitude was influenced, understanding of what a growth mindset is. And we did find that, in fact, it did make a difference in what they thought and perceived and their influence and their attitudes towards challenges. And the results of the project so far is we hear it in the words that the kids say during a challenge. If we're represented with a math challenge, an English challenge, a challenge in PE, a physical challenge, you'll hear them say things like, oh, I don't have it yet, or this is how my brain's learning. Well, they don't actually say this is how my brain's learning, but they'll say, okay, what are the strategies? Because they know they've learned that when you have a challenge and it's difficult, and then your brain finds strategies to overcome those challenges and difficulties, that you're actually learning.
Okay. Thank you, Kathleen.
Yeah.
So we're not going to go to the chat to debrief this particular video, but what I'm going to invite you to do is to think about it on your own in terms of what you saw from a teacher perspective, in terms of voice, co-creation, social construction, and self-discovery. One of the things that we really want you to take away from this session is the utility of this framework. These attributes, these 4 attributes, represent doorways that individuals can go through in order to start doing more of the kind of work that we shared this morning. I had the good fortune of being able to talk with Kathy about her research and to talk to her students about what it was like to be a part of that research, and the amount of insight they had into their own learning, and the way they could describe the skills that they had learned and how those skills are helping them to become more effective learners. They not only did the teacher internalize the research process, but those students understood that they were part of something important and that they actually emerged from that experience as more effective learners. So I hope what we've been able to share with you today gives you some insight into ways that what it looks like when students are given more voice and opportunity to be involved in their own learning. And I hope that we've also given you a framework to use to begin to think through your own practices. I know as a teacher, I always embrace these big ideas, and then I always wondered, where do I start? And I think this framework gives you 4 doorways in which to start, or maybe one doorway that's connected to another. So we hope we've left you with something that's valuable for your own practice. And we hope that you're inspired by the examples of teachers that we shared with you this morning. All right.
So as we go for closure, there's 1 or 2 more slides left to go. So this next slide is just a way of continuing to clarify how we work to make learning matter to our students. And the intention is that we start with the learner in mind. And the learner is not something that we are on the hook as teachers, as educators, as school leaders to design a set of meaningful experiences on their behalf. In fact, to actually invite them to the table, inviting students to the table to imagine the possibilities, to sift through the thorny problems and challenges. It not only makes learning more relevant and connected, but it actually makes it more challenging. And the interesting dynamic that we saw in that last clip is that students are very much willing to ante up for substantive challenges when they start to see the purpose and the value, but they are also are given a level of ownership and agency over identifying and engaging in the messiness of leading to an act of solution creation, doing something that benefits the world. So that's really the heartbeat of what this last slide shares. And for further information, if you can show that last slide, Kathleen, this is the contact information for all 3 of us. Again, the easiest way of taking a look at that is just to grab the slide deck that we shared in the beginning. So I will post that one more time in case you didn't grab that in advance. But it's just been such a joy and a pleasure to hang out with Kathleen, whose school is unbelievable. So you can do a virtual tour. But I have so much respect and awe for the kinds of thinking and work that's happening, not only with the students, but the entire school community. And my counterpart, Diane Ullman, we've been hanging out for a couple of years. We wrote Learning Personalized together, and it's just such a joy to spend time with this trio. So thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Allison and
Thank
Diane.
you.